concrete jungle where dreams are made of. There's nothing you can do. Actually, there is something you can do, and that's tune into the INC preview show. Hello there everyone, welcome back. My name is Karl Bainbridge and I am joined by the man on the right hand side of my screen. You might consider him the Jay-Z to my Alicia Keys. He's my friend and yours. It's Joe Neal. Joe, thank you very much for joining us.
Glad to have it. Glad to be representing, Jay-Z here, because as an ugly man, he got Beyonce, so there's hope for me. But I'm also here. I'm glad you stuck with the music in the New York scene, because I'm going to go with mine, and I'm glad to be the Ghostface Killer to your Raekwon the Chef. They made Cuban Links, which is one of the best albums ever, and they're both members of the legendary Wu-Tang Clan, which I think that's probably the first time I've ever thrown up the Wu. I should have wore the shirt, admittingly, for it. But big Wu-Tang Clan fan.
I have to be honest. When it comes to British rap music, it's like John Barnes,
Idris Elba. He had a rap album.
And then most of my knowledge as well when it comes to rap music is usually like Def Jam 5 for New York.
Very fitting. And I found my copy actually this week when I was going through everything. Found my copy of Def Jam 5 for New York, $300 PS2 game. It's like, okay, I might just keep this and let it rise in value, I guess.
So here's the most pressing question though: is playing Def Jam 5 for New York more appealing to you than UFC 309?
Can I plead the fifth here?
Yes.
I definitely can say that Def Jam 5 for New York is more appealing than 188. But this card it's got some problems for sure.
And we're going to be discussing those in a lot more detail throughout the show. Trust me, when we get to the main event, if you are a Jon Jones fan, you might want to skip that part of the show. One thing we'll say though is that we are back in Madison Square Garden. We made a lot of allusions to New York City. Now, since MSG hosted its first show in 2016, UFC 205, MSG's kind of become one of the sort of marquee events of the MMA calendar. So you go back to 205, which was a loaded show, 3 title fights, Conor made history, 217's up there as one of the greatest cards of all time, and there's been plenty of big highlight reel moments, entertaining fights. I would make the argument though that 309 on paper might be up there as one of the weakest MSG cards that they've done so far.
It's an average 2024 pay-per-view card. That's my rating of it at a glance, and I think that's pretty damning. As we know, the matchmaking has not been very good this year. Card quality has actually been up and down fairly well. I stand by. Excuse me, trying to sneeze.
Bless you. I know there's been allergies going around on your end.
Yeah, I'm one of those weirdos that, and I say weirdos, but a lot of people deal with it. Not any of my closer friends too, which sucks. I'm the one allergy guy. But it was literally fine until about like 40 minutes ago. Like we were on the call testing equipment when I was like, oh, it's starting to get kind of bad. I can feel it. But apologies. But we've had some great cards this year. I think 300 is a unbelievable card, like from top to bottom. Like that's one of the few cards from the first fight to the last fight. As much as I hate giving Dana credit, yeah, it delivers. It's a very, very good card. Some cards have not been great, and then this one kind of feels like it's in the middle. Like it has some interesting things on it, but I don't know if it's worth, I don't know about spending $80 redues on it. Yeah.
And I will say as well, based on some of the stories I've been seeing, I know the tickets for this event are apparently going very slowly. Now, this might be due to the general raising of ticket prices that the UFC have done over this year. There's been a lot of the pay-per-view events which have really struggled to sell. But also, you could make the argument the UFC have put a lot of their eggs into the Jon Jones basket.
the
It,
Jon Jones room, perhaps you would say.
yeah, the one that only he comes out of.
Yeah.
Yep. And maybe it's a sign that Jon Jones maybe doesn't have the same appeal with fans that he might have done, say, 2013, 2014.
Has he ever been a star?
He's had big
Like
pay-per-view
like
numbers.
when like DC?
Yeah, like the DC card, I think they did about 800,000, 700,000.
Oh.
A lot of it did depend on the opponent, though, because I think him versus
Yeah.
Glover was something like 350, 375.
Mm-hmm. But he would. I remember at the time thinking Glover would give him a pretty decent fight, but not quite beat him. But I thought he would give him a pretty decent fight. And then first round, I see him knuckle deep in an eye socket. And I went, oh, it's over. You know. Um, in fairness to Jon Jones, actually, he was doing some really cool things with like shoulder cranking in the clinch. That's actually pretty impressive in that fight. But doesn't mean he didn't, you know, get like this far.
What do you think's the biggest
But
factor in maybe the slow ticket sales? Do you think it is the Jon Jones issue, or do you think it's other factors?
kind of a top heavy card. Um, you know, it's like Bo Nickel was on the main part of UFC 300, and it didn't do anything for its star power. You know what I mean? Like you and me and a bunch of other people were like, "Oh, that's Dana White privilege right there." And I say that as a guy who thinks Bo Nickel's incredibly good, like a monster, potentially. As I said last week, I called Ilya Taporia a unicorn. Um, Nickel has the potential to be up there with like the Shavkas and Toporius for me. Um, I don't. At the same time, though, like like it's good to show him off, but and he needs help on this card. And Jon Jones, I don't feel like has ever. I feel like people talk about how awesome he is, but don't watch him fight. If that makes sense. That's always like my impression from like, a lot of casual fans I'm friends with. They're like, Jon Jones is the greatest ever. If Dana's right, he would walk out of that room. Like, okay. Like, what about Tom Aspinall? Stop it. um, uh, but I honestly, the Tom Aspinall shadow on this card is pretty hard. I think for me, at least for me, I think for like a lot of the hardcore fans, the Tom Aspinall shadow is pretty hard. And the casual MMA fan is not dropping $3,000 to be 100 feet from the cage. You know,
And I will
just kind of how it is.
And I will say as well, we will be talking about that Tom Aspinall shadow because some of the comments that Jon Jones has made in some of his recent interviews, that has helped add to the sort of the cloud that hangs over this fight and hangs over this event. But we'll get to our prelims first and foremost. You can see those on your screen right now. So as we sort of touched on before, a very top heavy card, the UFC putting a lot of faith in Jon Jones to be a big sell. One thing I will say though, looking at some of the fights on the prelims though, the UFC normally when it comes to their marquee shows, whether that's Madison Square Garden, whether that's a Conor McGregor card, whether that's International Fight Week, if you want a sign of who the UFC potentially sees as being one of their big stars of the future, look on the prelims of some of those cards. And I think there's a couple of names on here who I think the UFC have got a lot of faith in.
Oh yeah. Uh, there is. Well, there's one I'm happy to see on here because I want the UFC to have faith in her, mostly because of no offense against her, mostly because of who her husband is, and I love her husband, in Veronica Hardy. I remember when Dan Hardy knocked out, or when Dan Hardy was about to fight for the title, everyone at high school, like in my grade, I think I was a sophomore, wanted to be like Dan Hardy. Like, yeah, let's get him mohawks and paint it red and throw a lot of left hooks. Oh, and then like Carlos Condit knocks him out, and we all went, "Oh no!" Um, but I think that guy Chris Weidman's got a future.
Yeah, yeah.
Now, in fairness, this better be Chris Weidman's last fight. I swear,
I've got the feeling it could be.
better be.
New York City, Weidman being from the New York region. It was going to be on the main card originally. They chopped and changed some of the card around. I think they moved Rufi onto there. Like, should Weidman still be
I've heard
fighting
this
by
stuff. That should be
now?
fun. No, I don't think so. I, I'm of the belief that there was a period of time where Chris Weidman was, in terms of pure ability, uh, one of the most frightening fighters to ever fight, ever. Like, because he was a high level wrestler. He placed in Abu Dhabi as a purple belt with basically just wrestling in a purple belt. So his grappling potential was unbelievable. And he had a great camp behind him that was helping his striking develop, like, because he had the power, developing his striking into like a severely dangerous weapon. And he knocked out Anderson Silva legit, not because Anderson clowned. Once again, I have to stress, go watch that retro review if you don't believe me. Uh, I break it down, and I broke it down in another one. I broke it down in the first hot takes, I believe. Um, but yeah, what's it called? Honestly, post Rockhold, it's been hard.
I
You know?
think I think the big issue that you have when it comes to Weidman, I think it's easy enough for somebody to say, hey, Weidman should have stopped at X or Weidman should have stopped at Y.
Yeah,
I think the issue you have with Chris is in a lot of the fights he did lose, there was some sort of asterisk next to it because he looked
yeah,
good against Rockhold before the spinning wheel kick.
mhm,
He looked good against Romero. He looked good against Musashi.
yeah.
Jacare was a
Look,
very competitive fight.
I
So,
thought he was slightly winning the Jacare fight. Even,
yeah, that's a hell of a
yeah,
fight, by the way.
it's really good. It's a really good fight. Um, and poor, not Bruno Silva. That's who it was, wasn't it?
Bruno Silva was the fight he won.
Yeah. He got hit with the 1-2 Jon Jones special. Two New York boys going at it.
I think really if there was a
So
time for him to say, I give it up, like I understand why he kept going for the Brad Tavares fight.
mhm.
Because, hey, if I was a fighter, I wouldn't want people's last memory of me to be, writhing in pain with a broken leg. So I understand why he came back just to say, hey, I needed closure. But that to me should have been the sign, hey, this guy isn't the same anymore.
Yeah, that was a pretty hard one. I was a Weidman. I am a Weidman fan. Even with that stupid eye poke finish of the Silva fight, him defending that a little bit was like, come on, stop it. I like you. Um, but Jonathan Martinez is a guy they really got a lot of faith in. Jim Miller, company man, you know, they're always going to do right by him. Mickey Gall, surprised to see him on this card, but New York guy. Um,
And that late edition as well of Tabura versus Diniz, because Diniz was supposed to
oh
fight
yeah,
Derek Lewis. That fight fell through.
that's
We
right.
still don't know what's up with Derek Lewis, but an unranked guy getting the number 9, you can maybe see this as a sign of the UFC saying, hey, we want this guy pushed to the moon.
Mhm. Like push kick to a double leg to the moon, you say. That's only one guy who can save this card.
Oh, God. He's going to be fighting Spivak. Now,
Yeah, it
stylistically,
sounds
that could
fun.
be interesting, because Spivak has an active guard.
Yeah, I think that sounds really fun. I hope Spivak wins, mostly because I want Spivak to be the one to kick him into the double leg
I just
and
want
like
someone to
Uno
stuff. I
reverse.
want someone to stuff the first takedown to see what Jilton does after that.
Mhm.
Like,
Like, the display just started throwing hammers. It's like it was the most brain dead like response to this game plan. Instead of like, hey, maybe I should like move side to side, move lateral movement. It was like, no, I'm just gonna swing. It's like, okay.
you mentioned Jonathan Martinez. I'm actually more interested in his opponent, Marcus McGee.
I like Jonathan Martinez, but Marcus McGee, pretty interesting too. The fight should be really good. I wish that fight was on the main card, honestly.
And speaking of the main card, we are going to be going there right now. Fight number one takes us to the lightweight division, and it's Mauricio
Mm.
Rufy, the latest product of the Fight Nerds training camp. He's going to be taking on the short notice James Leontop. Now, Rufy he kind of emboldens for me what we talked about earlier on about the MSG rub. And if you
Yeah.
had to say to me, a fighter who made their debut in the UFC in 2024, who should I put my money on that they're going to be potentially a star of the future? I would honestly say Rufy. I have been so impressed with him, not only with the Contender Series appearance, but what he did to a grizzled veteran in Jamie Malarkey. Pieced him apart.
I totally forgot that he was a Fighting Nerds guy. Um, yeah, this guy is legit because I remember watching him fight, and I was like, oh, this guy has a first name that reminds me of a certain other Mauricio that, and then you see him just go out there and maul guys, and you go, that's awesome. This reminds me of a certain other Mauricio. Um, and yeah, I mean, Jamie Malarkey, he's very much super boy material for us here on the channel, but at the same time, what's it called? He is very fun and very, very sneaky and crafty. And it just didn't matter. This guy just blitz through him. His name One Shot is pretty apropos, for sure. He's swinging bombs at guys and in a smaller weight class too. So yeah, this he is. You think he's gonna has the biggest star potential out of all the fighting nerds?
Personally, if I had to be pushed, yes. I think there's guys who have maybe easier roads to a title fight. I think Baralio
Hmm.
is obviously a lot further down the path than what Rufy is.
Okay.
I am interested to see how Rufy would handle the grapplers because he hasn't faced anyone like
Yeah.
that yet in the UFC. But based on what I saw against his Contender Series opponent, who saw like a quintessential Dagestani wrestle boxer, seemed to deal with him fairly comfortably.
I think I want to see like Carlos Prates. I think he has like the big potential for me. For the fighting nerd. I mean, not Bangladesh. Karl for sure has it. Jean Silva looks insane.
They are
Um,
such a good training camp right now. Like,
they're so hot. Like they have four guys, right? Yeah, it's four guys. It's Taborayo. Um, oh, they had Thiago Moises too. It's funny. He was still in the UFC. I did not know he was a fighting nerd. Um, Carlos Prates, Carlos Prates, obviously, Jean Silva and Mauricio Rufy, and it's like, geez, I, this is horrifying. Like those four guys, each one of them is so good, and Calvert has just gotten better and better every fight. I feel like, because he went from like, ooh, this guy's super boring but does some cool stuff, to no, this guy's awesome. I want to see him fight every time. Just out of nowhere.
what do you think's the big
But
reason why a training camp suddenly becomes so good? Do you think it's a momentum thing, or do you think they're finding a sort of loophole at X Factor that maybe somebody else isn't?
I think it's a momentum thing. I mean, uh, so I don't really have because whenever I was training, I didn't really have other people training with me like super hard that were like going for things. So I didn't really get to experience it that way. But I've seen it in other sports, and I've seen it in super funny to me. I've seen it in video games, um, where one player is doing something really well, and then the other guy on your team he starts doing really well in like in something completely different, and then that translates to this like the camaraderie and momentum is just kind of gross because like MMA is weird because it's a not a team sport, but like camaraderie and partnership and like moving and going really seems to have effects in this game. Um, it's very odd, but that has to be something going there. Either that or they've they have like the best like the trainers there are secretly the best. It's kind of like when before we knew James Krause was like cheating or like betting, gambling problems and stuff. And like before that, it was like, oh wow, James Krause is a better coach than he was a fighter. What's going on? Like,
Krause had a really good
it's
stable
all
of fighters.
yeah. And I thought he was a decent little fighter, or not the little fighter, taller than me. I thought he was a decent fighter. I thought he was pretty good. I thought like outside of a low kicked loss to Bobby Green, like this guy was pretty good. But it's funny, Mauricio Rufy, me and him almost share a birthday. June 17th. I'm 16th. But I can see him get, a lot of them have the tattoos that are quite, like, no offense to them, a little douchey. And it's kind of, I wonder if, as a former, a former head of a wrestling promotion, used to love himself some big sweaty men. And
It's a good thing you mentioned
I
wrestling as
wonder,
well, because you see them, they've all got the glasses, they've all got the shtick. It just makes me think of the Dudleys.
yeah. Oh yeah, fighting nerds. Um,
The
uh,
Brazilian side
I
of
saw that.
Dudleyville.
There you go. Like this is one shot Dudley, and did you see that Akira Tozawa, Otis, and Maxine Dupree redid the classic Dudley's and Stacy Keibler pose where she was covering herself up with the belts. They redid that was their Halloween costume this year, and I was like, wow, that's awesome. They let Maxine Dupree do that.
Yeah, my dad used to watch a
Uh,
lot of wrestling with me when Stacey was the Duchess of Dudleyville for some reason.
yeah, I noticed that. I noticed all my family members always crowding around. I was like, I just want to see people go through tables. Uh, but yeah, so uh, like I feel like Dana White might just have a certain affection for guys with really really wild tattoos across their chest because Jon Jones has one.
Con-
They actually say I think that Connor
Connor?
Connor has Connor has one. Sean O'Malley. But if all those guys tattoo artists went into a room, Jon Jones's tattoo artist is walking out. I mean, Dana told me. Dana told me. So, I love that. I love that analogy, and I hope it blows up in his face.
So, technically, what are the
Mhm.
things you've noticed the most about Rufy outside of his power?
He's he's got a lot of knockouts. I didn't go super far back into his like pre-UFC fight days, but I kind of looked over him. He kind of I mean, like everyone always sees like him like punching people. He has some good kicks, but I mean, obviously, Jimmy Malarkey was a knee, what started the whole finishing sequence. Um, and he's this kind of feels like almost not relentless. His fights just do not feel like they last very long. Feels like I mean, every single fight on it is it every single fight? Yes, yeah, every single fight of his is 100% wins, and his only loss are by finishes, like with strikes. Just go, go, go. Yeah. He seems a little hittable, but nothing too crazy. Like it isn't blatant like Justin Gaethje coming into the UFC levels of hittable, right? He's a little hittable, but nothing like out of the ordinary. He seems like he's pretty solid off of his back. Like he can make things work, and I mean, because that's a good all that camp seems like they're pretty good grapplers. I mean, Cal Badayo's a very good grappler, so I'm not too surprised about that. But uh, I mean, he does kind of have that it factor. I definitely do want to see more of him because I want to know. I'm kind of with you. I want to see what he when I want to see what he does against wrestlers more,
Do you,
and I want to see. Go
yeah,
ahead.
do you think there's maybe some concerns in regards to cardio? Because one of the things we do find is if you're somebody who finishes your opponents quite early within the distance, there's maybe some concerns that you don't know how to handle it when the knockout doesn't come. And we kind of
Mm.
saw that when in his only loss, because that came against a guy called Manuel Souza, actually recently
Mm.
fought in Bellator. He actually
Oh.
hurt Souza quite early on in that fight, got a bit too carried away, wasn't able to get the finish, and then as the fight went on, he showed some signs of slowing down, showed some cardio issues, and that's when he ended up getting stopped. So do you think that's maybe some concern? Maybe not so much with this fight, but as he climbs further up the ladder.
Absolutely. Yeah. Um, because this is a division that's soon going to have Max Holloway in it. So fun dream fight there we could have. But Max Holloway is coming up, and I think if I was the lightweight division, I'm going to have to look at him like you know like the a big dude just walked into the cafeteria. Like I was like, oh, that's the new guy to watch out for coming up. And I even with his last fight, I still feel like you could punch him for hours without putting a dent into him. So that could be a potential issue. If Dustin Poirier sticks around, Dustin Poirier isn't the most durable guy on the planet, but he's very hard to hit clean. So that could be an issue. If he fought a Dustin Poirier type guy. Um, Rafael Fiziev could wear him out with body shots, and he could be swinging big on him. Uh, I mean, Tush Gamrot is going to wear you out cardio wise with his wrestling and his just constant pressure. So there's a lot of guys who are going to test your cardio in more ways than one coming up. So it's kind of interesting for sure.
There are, of course, two sides to the stories. We'll talk about the opponent here, which is James Lontop. Now, he's taking this fight on short notice. It was originally supposed to be Charlie Campbell who was going to be fighting Rufi, but Lontop steps in on, I think, 2 weeks' notice, 3 weeks' notice. So 11-4 so far. He's lost his first two in the UFC. He had a loss to a very short notice Chris Padilla on his UFC debut. And then most recently, he dropped a decision to Slava Claus in August of this year. Um,
Like that name.
yeah, I'm really going to struggle with saying his name. I think it's Vyacheslav Borshev. So Slava Claus is just so
Mm.
much easier. So 0-2
Yeah.
so far in the UFC. This is going to be his third fight in this calendar year. Potentially, he could be looking at trying to win this fight to save his place in the promotion, especially with how ruthless the UFC have been recently with the cuts.
Oh yeah. Um, I mean, I always forget this guy's nickname is Goku. It's kind of funny. And I think he's gonna need it. I think he's gonna need that kind of bounce back energy because this is a. Oh, excuse me. Try not to sneeze again.
Everyone forgives you,
Allergies,
Joe.
no fun. No fun. Yeah, allergies, no fun for Joe. At least I'm not sick. I'm fine. I'm just sneezy. Um, Hopefully I'm good by tomorrow. I have a date tomorrow. Oh, one more.
We'll be discussing that in a lot more detail when it comes to Uncaged. So if you want to know about Joe's dating life, that's where you go to.
That's exactly where. Let's just say this chick is she's got a height advantage on me by a lot.
So I heard
Uh,
someone describe Lontop as sort of a great example of the template of Central American fighters, where it's relying on a lot of lateral movement, a lot of mainly sort of striking heavy, a lot of boxing, but not much head movement. And that's a big concern when it comes to someone like Rufi, because I get the feeling this is going to be one of those situations where you have a guy in Lontop who is going to use a lot of forward pressure, going to try and coax Rufi into some dangerous positions, but he's going to eat a lot of shots to do so.
Well, kind of something I noticed is in the Chris Padilla fight, which, like you said, super, super, super short notice. But he didn't seem like he really had the grappling to go that distance. So I do, I do kind of like the quintessential Central American, South American fighter of no head movement, box. Let's box. Because I thought that hurt him against in the Borshev fight. It was actually not. It wasn't terrible, if I remember right. But at least my note says wasn't the worst thing I've watched. I don't know what that means. I don't remember. This week was busy. But I also took these notes last week because I got the date. I got the weekends mixed up. I thought the pay-per-view was tonight and last week was. I don't know why. Um, but yeah, um, that's definitely a scare if you don't have the head movement or defensive prowess to deal with a guy who has literally 10 KOs and it's all of his wins, like 100% finish rate. And part of you, like, he's like in a weird spot because there's no moral victory really here. Because if you survive and you're the first guy to take him to distance, normally you would have that like, oh, okay, I feel good about this. I had a moral victory here because I forced him to go to distance. Um, you're still getting cut. A moral victory doesn't count on your record, and the UFC they can spend like they're gonna in their mind it's all about the money. Of course, like any business, there's nothing wrong with that. They're gonna be like, we can spend this 7-7 somewhere else. Like, which is not fun. So his back's against the wall, thinking he's gonna need the spirit bomb, Goku Dragon Ball Z style for this one. Um, it's gonna be a tough one for sure because his head is always his he doesn't quite have the Rashad Evans problem, where Rashad Evans' head movement was pretty good until he threw a punch and then it was on the center line again. So um, his head's always center line. And I didn't see him ducking a ton into shots. So my brain was like, was he going to duck into a flying knee? But we'll see.
I will say to his credit though, Lon Top hasn't lost a fight by strikes so far in his career. 2 submission losses, 2 decision losses.
It's true. He's tough. He has one in the amateurs, but that was in 2015, 9 years ago, which we were different people 9 years ago.
I probably wasn't.
It's fair. I was 21 and happy.
I will say,
Gonna give a straight face.
looking at these 2 fighters here, I see a guy with chest tattoo, a lot of hype behind him on the UFC. He's been placed on a really prominent, high-profile main card, taking on a short-notice guy who is known for being durable, but not much else. This is just Sean O'Malley versus Chris Moutinho.
It's fair. And in fairness, Chris Moutinho, it's a bad stoppage. I thought he had him on the ropes. I thought he had Sean O'Malley on the ropes. I thought he was like, oh, here we go. Now I've got him. Sean O'Malley's hands are broken from punching me too much.
The Homer Simpson strategy.
Yeah. You just got to land that one shot. I love Homer punching the bag and like Moth not dying. It's like, what?
And that one punch gashing him out as well.
Oh, yeah. I actually watched a bunch of Treehouse of Horrors this week. It's such a good. Oh, those are my favorites always. I always like the Shining one, of course. Willie running into the house and that's the best you chopping. My favorite is still the Nightmare on Elm Street one, though. I think Slousy Smarch weather we have.
Well, it's a good thing you're talking about a vengeful Scotsman, because we'll talk about fight number 2 here. Our boy Paul Craig, he's back in action here. It's a middleweight bout, and he is very much the underdog going into this one. You can get Paul Craig at plus 650, because he's going to be taking on the minus 1,000 favourite, and probably the biggest Dana White project of the moment, which is Bo Nickel. So this is going to be Bo Nickel's 4th fight since joining the UFC. And here is a list of his appearances so far. So far, he has been on UFC 285, which was a Jon Jones main card. He's been on the main card of International Fight Week, UFC 300 main card, and now he's on an MSG main card. So we have a lot of praise for Bo Nickel and his abilities and what he could potentially be in the sport. But do you fear that him being put so prominently on some of these high-profile cards could create a bit of a Roman Reigns situation?
Dog into another big dog. Um, that's actually pretty funny. Absolutely. Um, I hope he doesn't get pushed down our throats too hard, like because of that. Yeah.
Because
Um,
I do remember in the build to UFC 300, and that was a loaded card. There was a lot of options that could have
uh
been on the main card. I think for them to choose Bo over some of those other fights, I think it did jar people the wrong way.
over Yuri and Ditch, like over Yuri mostly. It's like what? Aljo or Diego Lopez, which in hindsight, I'm sure they would have done that. Like I think in hindsight, they would have done that.
Or even Caleb, considering it
Um,
was her debut, all the hype.
True. Yeah. Kayla Harrison, and she just mauled Holly Holm. I thought that fight was going to be boring, and instead she just mauled Holly Holm, and I was so happy. Um, but yeah, this one's he's definitely been shoved down our throats pretty hard. Um, and his last fight wasn't the most impressive thing, but and I know some people have even criticized his like apparent lack of activity. And I all I can think of is he's been fighting for 2 years and has 6 fights. That's pretty good, you know. Um, I hope he doesn't get pushed too hard on us because he's pretty good. Like, I mean, obviously, I mean, he has like him. Okay, the two current ones, Shavkat, because I think Shavkat wins welterweight title no matter what at this point. Um, and that's just me. It's my opinion. Obviously, we'll break it down when we get there finally, because that got pushed back. I hope Belal's okay, because that foot was gnarly. That toe. I hope he's doing okay though, at least. But um, Shah Khan is a unicorn. Ilya Tapori is a unicorn. Bo Nichols probably a unicorn if he puts it all together, because he is just an outstanding wrestler, and his jiu-jitsu is coming along very, very well. He's telling people like I admittingly think if for fun, why not just have him fight like Hamzat after this?
Like I really want to see that fight, only because
Yeah,
I think Hamzat is
um,
so confident in his abilities, he would try and wrestle Bo.
me too. And I think that's how he
Yeah.
loses. That's how he's gonna lose. Yeah.
Like I remember like Daniel Cormier was asked that question and he said if these two had a wrestling match right now, there's no question Bo Nickel's gonna win.
Bo Nichols gonna I remember oh, I don't remember his name, but he was a cruiserweight, and he had like a mustache in WWE, and he would put people in like a pretzel lock. Like that was like one of his like signatures. Um, oh, what was his name? Tasty, like really white, like really pale. No, I think about it, he was British.
Jack Gallagher?
Oh, I was gonna say James Gallagher, and I was like, that doesn't sound right. It was him. Yeah, he used to put people in the cruiserweight tournament in like a pretzel lock and tie them up. That's what Bo Nickel would do to. He would tie Hamzat in a ton of knots. It's not MMA isn't a wrestling match though, but Hamzat's not. Hamzat's just gonna shoot a double on him, like thinking he can take him down, and that's Bo Nickel's gonna laugh all the way to the bank because of that. Um, but what's kind of fun here, he's got to take a guy who has a very active bottom game and has tapped out a lot of good people from his back, despite being from the bigger weight classes. in Paul Craig. So you kind of wonder.
And I think that's one of the reasons why the UFC chose to book this fight in particular.
Mm,
Because we all know what Bo can do with his wrestling. Is he going to try and do that against Paul Craig to play into the guard game? Or is Bo Nickel maybe going to take the sort of the easier road, as it were, keep this
yeah.
standing, and maybe take advantage of some of Paul Craig's limitations when it comes to his stand up?
Yeah. Paul Craig isn't the best striker, obviously. Like that's definitely his limitation in the realm of MMA.
I will say, there's an MMA website that I usually go to, and I use this as like a starting point for a lot of my own notes. And
Hmm.
they had a breakdown of a lot of the fighters which appear on this main card, and they wrote one about Paul Craig, and they broke it down to wrestling, jiu-jitsu, and striking. And for the striking column of Paul Craig, before they talked about some of the things he does, they just wrote, Paul Craig is not a striker.
Pretty funny.
And I say that as someone who loves
Yes.
Paul Craig. He is definitely one of my boys.
I mean, he technically has a TKO over Jamal Hill. That's gross. Actually, that finish is really gross. Uh,
Paul Craig finished him
huh?
faster than Pereira.
Yeah,
Just
AKA
saying.
he's better. He's better. If Jamal Hill and Magomed Ankalaev fought for the title, both those guys at the time would have, because that fight almost happened. It was going to be a fight between Rick's children, as you called it. Um,
I honestly believe there was one point when Ankalaev, Hill, and Krylov were all in the top five, and the most recent loss came against Paul Craig.
it's wild, wild. Yeah, because Krylov was top five for a little bit. Um, I like Nikita Krylov too.
So
He's always been a favorite of
we'll
mine.
talk about Paul Craig in a bit more detail here, and then we'll go back to Bo. So a 17-8 record. So his most recent fight was a loss against Baralho, who we just mentioned before, UFC 301. And along with those three wins we mentioned, there's also wins over Andre Muniz, who is a very good grappler in his own right, and then also beat a well past his prime Shogun Hua. And it leads to the question here, and I mean this in a nice way. If you are a Paul Craig fan, I don't mean any ill. Is
Yes,
Paul
we are.
is Paul Craig the best bad MMA fighter in terms of a guy who has a lot of obvious limitations, but has a number of marquee big wins? Like the only other guy I can think of is like Michael Johnson.
Alex Pereira. I,
You said it, not me.
I thought you were going to, and I was like, I was sitting here. That's why I paused. I was like, he's gonna say it. I guess I have to. It's funny because he's won me over. I like Alex Pereira now. I'm sorry, I've gone to the dark side. Uh,
I just
but
want the wrestler question answering. That's all. That's
me
what I've
too.
always said.
Absolutely. That said, I don't want them. I'm tired of him ducking on Kalaya. Oh, let me rephrase. The UFC ducking on Kalaya for him. Um, I'm not going to put words in his mouth, but I think the UFC is ducking on Kalaya. Uh, but yeah, he feels very throwback to me, Paul Craig. Like I always get the vibes of like 2007 Spike TV Fight Night card, where it's like Ryan Jensen fighting. Like oh Ryan Jensen, all he can do is take you down and arm triangle choke you. He's gonna fight Houston Alexander, who can just who can really hurt you, and that's it. Like he's like this cannon of nightmare. Um, he kind of reminds me of like that era, in like a fun way, but obviously better. Like his wrestling isn't fantastic. He has to kind of muscle you down because he's a very, very strong lad. But he's like his striking isn't there. Um, I he's one of the few people I know to be knocked out by a guy on one foot. Um, so his durability's starting to fade as time's gone on, sadly. Maybe Father Time's a part of that
Yeah,
for sure.
because he's in his late 30s
But
now.
yeah, but my God, can this dude grapple?
And someone
This dude can grapple.
And someone pointed out a few of the X's and O's about Paul Craig's grappling, and it was the first time I really sort of paid interest to how he actually manages to get a lot of these submissions. So there's two things in particular which he noticed. One,
Mm,
Craig does like to try and engage with the takedown in his own right. So
mm,
when he shoots for the takedown, he'll do it intentionally. He'll shoot on his knees. So either he gets a takedown from his knees, or he then uses
Full on.
that to roll back and then pull opponents into his guard. The other thing he does
Mhm.
quite well as well is if you look at Craig's foot positions, he's always got his feet on the hips. He uses that to create a bit of space. Obviously, his head's exposed, so the instinct is to go back down to try and land some shots. When you're doing that, foot on the hips, he gets you off balance, and that's when the legs come up. And that's what he did with
He's
Krylov. That's what he did with Hill.
he's his triangle chokes. That was my favorite when I grappled was big choke guy. For a not very cool reason. I think it's kind of cool, but it's like I always looked at it like I held your life in my hands instead of like, oh, you just can't walk tomorrow. That isn't as cool. But I was always a choke guy, and triangle choke was in my opinion, my best one. Then my guillotine, I don't write two best, and a little bit of Joe Daddy Stevenson in me, dare I say. But uh, in triangle chokes, I really wish he was around, like as success, like as big as he was um, now back then, because I see things he does to set up his triangles, and I just go lucky, like I or not lucky, like too late. This is stuff I could have been doing to make my own even better. Um, because I for my height, I have or for my weight, I was tall, so I could get like my legs around and like great positioning and do some do pretty well off my back. I was pretty happy off my back. A lot Paul Craig. Um, but yeah, that one always his I love how he gets his triangle chokes because I love the foot on almost not quite butterfly, but foot on the hips and to kick the legs back and then to just move them slightly because he's very strong off of his back in the sense of like how he can move you and twist you and do things. So, um, I mean, he's a very good guard player. Honestly, he reminds me of like a more limited Frank Mir in a sense because like Frank Mir was heavyweight tapping him and Nogueira were tapping dudes off their back, which you don't really see at heavyweight. That's like a lower weight class type of thing. In reality, you don't really see that at all anymore. Tapping dudes off your back is like once every like, oh hey, that was cool, kind of moment.
So, what tools will Bo Nickel try and utilize to avoid the Paul Craig guard?
I think he's gonna go for outside trips. I think if he's gonna clinch up, and I think I could see him using Greco to try and trip him down to get into like better positions like half guard, or if he gets underneath him underneath his center of gravity and is able to lift, he's definitely going to take him for a ride and try to jump into side control. But even then, on the feet, he's pretty confident with his hands and his kicks and his strikes. Like he's starting to build confidence in his striking. I wouldn't be surprised to see him go, I'm just going to strike with him this whole fight. Which Paul Craig is not a striker, as you know. Um, and so that's definitely probably the safest route in Bo Nickel's mind. Um, I am picking Bo Nickel by stoppage. I think he TKO here in second round. He does seem to have a lot of power though, so if he puts leather on chin, probably good night uh, in first. But whenever, even if you're coming along as a striker, you have to put the leather on Chin. Like it's not an if, or it's not a win. It's an if. Is kind of my thing with strikers or people who are getting better at the striking game, but I'm not fully confident. And that's kind of how I am with Bo Nickel. I think he can box. I think he can strike. Great, but he can do it. So it's an if for me, not a win. It's not like Taporia, where I know Taporia was going to land a shot eventually, and I just Max was too tough for it. This one is, will he land a shot on Paul Craig even? Um, so that's kind of it's kind of a fun matchup actually. It's just a pretty good one for sure.
Because we haven't seen too much of Bo Nickel when it comes to a striking base, but from the few
Hmm.
things I have seen, he is very quick. In terms of his stand-up, his ability to get in and out of range, we saw that when he pieced apart Val Woodburn, which I think was his
Hmm.
second UFC appearance. And again, you can have
Yeah,
some questions over whether or not Woodburn was UFC level, but he looked very quick on his
yeah.
feet. The other thing
Yeah,
I
because
did
Woodburn was
see,
a short notice replacement too, I think.
yeah, he was because he was supposed to be Trezan Gore.
Oh yeah, which he dodged a bullet, honestly. I kind of like that guy. I like Brian Battle more, obviously. Same guys from those seasons. I always associate them. But uh, that dude, yeah, dodged a bullet with that one.
With that being said, I did notice in the stand-up exchanges with Cody Brundage intentionally went out all guns blazing and was throwing anything and everything, really trying to catch Bo off guard. And I think Bo was a bit put out by that. He was a bit, I'm not sure what's happening here. I'm just going to turn to the wrestling just to play it safe.
Yeah, it's not gonna. You have to like because if you can, he's been wrestling his whole life, right? And if you put him in a situation where he has to think or rely on his instincts. If he's thinking, you can hit him. If he's relying on his instincts, he's gonna wrestle you. So if you want him to wrestle you, doing something like that isn't the worst idea. But I feel like I remember him landing a head kick on somebody at one point, but I could be crazy.
I'm going to
Huh.
favour the latter.
I'm probably just, yeah, that's actually fair.
Welcome to the club. I went crazy years ago.
Yeah, it's fair. I mean, we've both been making the same joke for weeks now about Jon Jones in his little room. I mean, and that's not old to me yet. So
So I'm going to be picking Bo Nickel to win this one. I'm going to say a second round KO, and I think he's going to do it.
mm,
I would say about 90% of the fight is going to be stand up. I think Craig is going to be the one to try and make this a grappling match. And I think Bo is going to use this to say, hey, I'm not even going to take that chance.
I mean, if you want to show off your striking, go for it. I think I have a second round TKO. I think he has to put leather on him, and I don't know if he can necessarily. It's gonna be a little difficult, just almost always. It's always really hard for, like I said, just to be confident that he can put the leather on Shin. But that said, um, I think he'll eventually hurt him and then take him down and just finish from there at some point. I don't think he'll submit Paul Craig. I know that'd be a really good feather in his cap, I think, if he got to submit Paul Craig. Um, but I think he does. I think he does finish him for sure with the pretty similar idea. TKO for me.
Fight number 3, and we are going to the women's flyweight division here, and it is the number 9 seed Viviane Araujo, and she's going to be taking on Karini Silva, who was at number 11. No bookmakers odds for this one, which I was able to find. So, looking at this fight, Joe, you can make the argument that the first 2 fights on this main card are, let's be frank, showcase matches. One is for Bo
Yeah.
Nickel, the other is for Rufi. This one,
Hmm.
on paper, seems to be a lot more competitive. Yet I can
Hmm.
almost guarantee that when people are looking at this card in the upcoming fight week, this is going to be the fight that most everyday fans will be turning their nose up at. And that's not any sort of criticism of the 2 fighters involved. I just think that I don't know. I get the feeling this year, for whatever reason, women's MMA doesn't have the same sort of fan appeal that it once did. And I think that unless you have an absolute barn burner, the current fan base is going to find something to criticise with a women's bout.
Pretty sure. I I've noticed that a lot lately. To be fair, I think this fight sticks out a little bit like a sore thumb on the card. Um, but that's just me. Um, but I'm not gonna stick my nose up to it. But I have noticed this year a lot of people going, okay, fine, sure, have them on the card. And I'm like, what? That's super weird. It's just kind of weird to me. Um, that said, I mean, uh, I hope this fight's good. Because Karini Silva does seem interesting. Um, Viviane Arroyo, she's on a lot of good people, beat some good people, lost to some good people. Just kind of, you know, she's definitely trying to. I feel like I hate this term, but she's definitely been around, um, for sure in the sport. And I don't think this is necessarily a showcase. I'm sure the UFC's hoping it is for Karini Silva, but I don't think it is. I think this fight is more competitive for sure. I do agree with you on that one. Um, but the barn burner potential is maybe at a 6 out of 10 here, 5 out of 10. Um, I don't think it's necessarily super high, and I have noticed the fan base kind of, do that. But I do think this card does stick out a little bit.
So we'll talk about Viviani here, first and foremost. A 12-6 record. Now she's coming into this fight off a loss, ironically enough, against another Silver, Natalia, which happened in February earlier this year. And I think now that Jennifer Maia has retired, not retired, but she's left the promotion, gone back to Invicta,
Mm.
Viviani's kind of taken her role in being the sort of flyweight gatekeeper. Because if you
Mhm.
notice, a lot of the fighters that she's beaten, and she actually beat Jennifer Maia, which I think was Jennifer's last fight in the UFC.
Yeah.
She's had wins over Andrea Lee, Roxanne Modafferi, Montana De La Rosa. But if you look at the fighters that she's lost to, Jessica Rai, Caitlin Chukasian, Alexa Grasso, Amanda Ribas.
Best champ of the division, the greatest
Not
ever.
after Noche UFC.
I mean, last time I checked, it's 1-1-1, and Alexa has the only finish, so her win weighs more. Um,
It wasn't one of Alexa's best performances, though.
oh, it was horrible. I like how her coaches even were like, we didn't go over this. What was she doing?
So
Uh,
So the people that Viviani has lost to have all been quite established good names, especially at the time that she fought them. So you can maybe make the argument that she is the divisional gatekeeper, but there's a lot of things that she does which I am impressed by. I think she's a really physical fighter. She hits hard, maybe isn't the most refined. If there is one thing I have noticed in a lot of her losses though, she does get a bit flummoxed by fighters who have a lot of movement. And we saw that especially when she fought Chukasian, because we know what Chuk's like, a lot of movement, staying on the outside. Jessica Rai eat her apart with leg kicks. And
oh yeah,
I think that's a route that Karini Silva might want to take if she wants to win this one. That being said, Karini herself, very grappling heavy.
yeah, very grappling heavy. Uh, it's she Vivian is very plodding, I think is the fair word to describe her footwork. Very plodding, kind of just walk, like kind of wades in to it. I think she does hit hard. Very sloppy punches is a great way to describe it. Um, Not the most uh, technically technically sound striker of the card. Definitely has a Paul Craig vibe.
I'm not sure if
Uh,
is Viviani in the same training camp as Andrade, because I do see some similarities in how they approach the stand up.
oh, I actually that's a good point. Soldado MMA?
Possibly. I'm not 100%
I
sure.
think that's about it. Yeah.
I'm just thinking like a lot of forward pressure, maybe doesn't move ahead as much, likes to sort of like cajole people to the fence and then use that to get the
It's
takedown.
here. And it's like right here. Too.
Yeah.
Yeah. Uh, well, that's good. That's a good eye. I didn't think about that. That would make a lot of sense. At very least training partners, and it would make sense why they haven't fought because I feel like these two have fought most everybody nowadays. Uh, Vivi is she all she's needing is a Michelle Watterson on here, and it's like you fought them all. Um, um, recently retired person ish, recently ish, but yeah, and Carini a lot more like she has striking wins, but for the most part, it's she's just trying to tap everybody out. Um, four submissions in the UFC, that was pretty sweet. Uh,
I believe the Ariane Lipski fight was Karini Silva's first decision win.
it is.
9 KOs, 8 submissions. Unbeaten since 2019 as well. And he also checked as well. Yes, Karini Silva does have 4 losses on her record. 3 of those girls went on to fight in the UFC. And the other one
Yeah.
is Marina Moknatina, who fights as a featherweight and is now a finalist in the PFL.
Hmm. Yeah, she is a PFL finalist for this picture. Her because it her because she's Sergey Spivak's wife. Uh, and it's super funny. There's a picture of her. It's from when she was doing what's it called her like sambo tournaments and stuff like that. She's in like a green dress, and it looks like the most 90s or 80s style ever. It's very very funny to me. Uh, but Sergey Spivak's wife.
Is
Good for
it
him.
Amir Khani, who on his topology page, it's him doing like a modeling shoot, so he's doing like proper pouty face, lying on a. I'm sure it's someone like that.
Oh, I hope so. He sounds about right. He did have a video of him just eating an apple for hours. Yes, it is. That's his Yeah, that's his tapology thing. It's him with 3 blondes and a brunette on a couch with like a martini and poker chips around. Um, that is
Bearing in
unbelievable.
mind his cardio, though, those ladies are going to be disappointed.
Yeah, poor girls.
So let's get back to Karini Silva here. So, what would you say are her big traits? What's she going to want to do to try and get the best out of Vivi?
He's definitely seems like very grappling heavy for sure, which is really funny to me because when I was doing some research on her, I saw words being said about her that triggered my childhood because she claims that she started working. Her first martial art was Chinese boxing, which is what Bruce Lee calls kung fu in Return of the Dragon when he goes to Italy and fights Chuck Norris in the Colosseum. I think he called it Chinese boxing. It's really fun. So I saw that. I went, oh, like that's awesome. Is she sidekicking people? She's not. Um, but she definitely like what's it called? She's pretty solid off of her back. But like if because in the Contender Series, I remember her getting taken down, and she was doing pretty good at like stifling offense, throwing back, which I don't think is ever great unless you have like a great like mission control rubber guard if you're an Eddie Bravo person, and like you can throw elbows and actually get a decent little turnover into it. Um, only one guy's ever been able to strike well off his back, and he's
I
right
knew you were
here.
going to mention Bars. Won the
When
UFC heavyweight title by spending 90% of the fight off his back.
Yeah, shows you how good he was. It wasn't a bad judging call.
I will say, I'd love to try and think of an excuse for us to cover an old Bars card.
If we got to cover that fight, like that fight's insane. That's my second favorite fight ever. Um, it's just weird. Like if we did like an old pancrase card, we would have to like open up with like, hey, this is how pancrase rules are. It's so much different. Like and like UFC, right? It's like, hey, if there's a knockdown, they give you a 10 count, like in boxing. There's no follow up ground and pound. Um, So, which is, I think, less safe than modern day thing. Because I've been hurt and gotten up when I shouldn't have got up, and not just in life, like I fall down or something, like hit my head or something. And it's like, oh, imagine if you had to get hit again like that. It's not very fun. Um, but it's like, yeah, you lose a point when you get knocked out, like in boxing. So a TKO can be you got knocked down too many times. There's no closed fist punching to the face. You can only punch in the like neck down, like we're below the neck. You can palm strike in the face though, because like people would slap and power slap, dare I say. And I really hope that's what gave Dana White the inspiration. Like this is stupid, and he watched like an old Pancrase fight and went, "Never mind." Um, but like and their grappling rules are weird. There's not like a lot of ground and pound in them. Like there's no Mark Coleman going in there double legging people and like just smashing them with headbutts and hammer fists. So it's definitely a little weird. It's definitely like a little odd, but seeing Boss Rudin in his prime is a thing of beauty because he is the best striker that can really grapple with people. Like one of the first guys to like really mix two specialties together because he became a high level grappler over the course of his career. And because he walked in as like the scariest dude ever in striking. I think he had more of an aura than Alex Behaim ever will have. Just saying, and I'm saying that as a guy who's gone to the dark side of Pereira. Um,
Here's a question for you then, Joe. If we did do, if we
Boss or
did
Pereira.
do Pancrase as a retro review topic, does the winning entry get more viewers than our Invicta retro review?
So here's the thing: to get us back on track here, we technically could do uh, a Pancrase card with Vivian Arroyo on here.
Ah, I see. Yes, because Pancrase became
Oh,
a proper unified rules promotion,
yeah,
didn't it?
it did. It did. I do think. I think if we put Boss Rutan on the cover, it's going to do more than Invicta. As that is.
People need to see more Sally Crumdiak fights.
I don't understand what was wrong with that card. Honestly, the main event was pretty bad, but the card was pretty fun.
So other things I've noticed about Carini as well. There is maybe one concern that I do have, and I say this again. We brought this up with Ruthie, and to an extent, we can also say this with
Mhm.
Bo Nickel as well. When you are a fighter who has so many early finishes, you do sometimes have a reputation of maybe slowing down later on. Is that a concern that you
Mhm.
saw with Carini from the Lipsky fight?
I thought she slowed down a little bit by the third round. Um, I thought she was. I'm not gonna say she blew her wad, as the saying goes. Um, there's one that'll let us demonetize. But that wasn't very funny. Thank you for laughing though.
I have a really
Um,
bad sense of humor.
so do I. Most jokes I tell are to make myself laugh, and I just hope someone else will laugh. Um, uh, yeah, I think she kind of gassed out a little bit near the end. I don't think it was like, sound the alarm. It's all going downhill. It was pretty rough. It was very noticeable for sure. But grappling is going to wear you out way faster than striking will. Um, Grappling from the bottom is it's unbelievably exhausting, but on top is pretty rough too. Um, it's it's really funny too that the part of the sport that is all about getting striked and hit with stuff is I personally think um not as hard on your body, outside of the old brain case. Not as hard on your body in terms of lingering injuries throughout the years, and way less exhausting. Like because man, speaking of Boss Rutten, he has one arm longer than the other because of neck injuries and spinal injuries. As Mike Tyson said, spinal. Um, spinal. One of my favorite. I love Mike Tyson. That's one of my favorite quotes of his. Like, it broke my back. Spinal. Him and Diedrich Tatum, I wish fought. Uh, um, but yeah, those two guys are like, he had all those injuries, and like, and they're from grappling. It wasn't from striking. It was from grappling, and grappling's really hard on your body. Um, so I understand her cardio issues, but it should be it shouldn't be as big of a concern as it would be with like Rufy, I think.
I am going to be picking Silver to win this one, and I'm going to say it's going to be
So,
a
agreed.
quite a grappling heavy unanimous decision. Because the
Mhm.
one thing you will say about Viviani is that even though she does have that 12-6 record, there's only ever been one fighter who's been able to finish her, and that was with strikes.
Mhm.
So I think she's got the abilities on the ground to avoid the submission threat of Silver. I think it would be a
Mhm.
big feather in Karini's cap if she was to get the submission. I just don't see it happening. What I do hope, though, is this fight does deliver. Because it's a Madison Square Garden card. There's, as mentioned before, some of the sort of pushback against women's MMA happening right now. So I hope these girls do justify
Mhm.
their place on the card.
I 100% agree with that. In my notes, I have verbatim here. Um, I hope there's no Jake Shields in this fight, which means I hope there's no Jake shielding. I'm not gonna get that over like I got Holly Holman over, but I'm okay with that because I think everybody kind of gets what I'm saying by that. I don't want like lay and pray. I don't want that in this fight. I think it will be a grappling heavy decision win for Carini. I don't see her submitting uh, Vivian for sure. Is the only fighter I remember, and I have a weird memory of finishing Vivi was Alexa
Uh,
Grasso.
it it was a
Weird memory.
decision. Actually, the only
Actually,
person to
yeah,
finish Vivi was another UFC alum, Zara Frota.
yeah, it's really weird.
A lot of these Brazilian fighters,
Yeah.
I always find that a lot of the Brazilian girls that come into the UFC, they pretty much already fought one another like 8 or 9 times by the time they get it to the promotion. Like, I think
Oh,
it's
yeah,
something I'm seeing a lot more with
weird.
the female side of the sport in Brazil. A lot of these girls are coming into the UFC and they've already had 19, 20 fights by the time they're, what, 23, 24.
It's really odd. I think personally, but it's kind of cool at the same time, um, because like what is it? I feel like I'm kind of happy the UFC holds a lot of their roster, like a lot of their women's roster from down there, because I think it's a hotbed right now, personally, for in terms of where you're going to get like a lot of. I hate this term. I don't think you're going to get a lot of filler talent. I think you're going to get like a lot of like actual like people like Vivian. Like I think that's kind of how they grabbed her. You know, was they just said, "Jungle Fights champs" or like anyone down here, Pancrase champs? What's going on here? Yoink, yoink. You know what? You too. Like, and that's good. I think that's a good place to look for. I
Ask
think
them where they're
personally.
hiding the 135ers.
Are you asking as a suitor?
So now we move on to our core main event, and we're getting a little bit of deja vu because this is a rematch from UFC 262. Charles Oliveira, the number 2 seed in the lightweight division, he's going to be taking on Michael Chandler. Now, these two men first fought, as mentioned before, back in 2021. It was the main event of the second card back since we returned from lockdown. So it's one of those cards and one of those fights which, from my own personal perspective, I'm really fond of. I think a lot of those early post-lockdown cards, there was a big buzz in the atmosphere, the crowds were hyped for it, and I don't know about you, Joe, I love that fight. I love that first fight.
that fight is so damn good. Um, I'm a big fan of the early lockdown cards too. Um, or it because or we were coming back from it, like just it was it was an emotional kind of feel to it, I think. Um, and card is pretty good too itself. Funny, we just talked about her. Vivi was on that card, but that main event is something special, I think, because I think that fight's really, really good. Um, I like it more than the Barboza Shane Burgos fight personally. That fight's great too. Don't get me wrong, fight's fantastic, but the stakes and the hype of Michael Chandler, because I was a Michael Chandler fan, well, at least like not a huge one, but I liked him in Bellator. So seeing him come to the UFC, even if it was a little too late for my liking, would like him in his 20s to have come over. I think that would have been a lot of fun. But I'm happy to have him here regardless. It still feels weird to say that Michael Chandler fights in the UFC. Like that still feels really weird to me because to me, when I think of Bellator, I think Michael
Yeah.
Chandler still to this day. Like I think of Michael Chandler. I don't think of Austin Van Zant or whoever they're pushing nowadays. I'm kidding. I I wanted to make that joke. It wasn't a very good one. It's a little cruel, honestly. I apologize to Mr. Vanderford. Um, and but yeah, that fight was really something cool because we know why they put those two together because Dana was trying to get Habib back, and they didn't want someone who Habib had beaten to be in the fight for the new title, right? The vacated title. So it made sense. And I was thinking that fight was going to be pretty good. It was way better than expected. It was very good. And that is probably the best single left hook I've ever seen. Still to this day. Uh, that left hook is a thing of beauty. I think the only ones at the top of my head, um, oh, I forget his name. My brain says Scott Askham, but Dan Hardy, his left hook KO is very good in the UFC. He has one that's very, very good, and he was known for it. He was like almost Mr. Left Hook for a little bit, but even though he only had the one finish with it, but you also had what's his face, another great one, Carlos Condit knocking out Dan Hardy is another crazy left hook that is just unbelievable. It's crazy. It's coming full circle, you know. The guy known for a left hook, they both throw at the same time, and the guy known for it gets knocked out, and it's
Rose
wild.
Joanna?
Um, that's Yeah, Rose Yuan is a very good one. You know what's funny with that one? I always think of the low kick as she's falling is what the strike I always think of because as Joanna's falling, Rose is throwing the left hook and then turning over into the low kick, and you see her hit the chin as Joanna's like falling back. It's kind of wild. Reminds me of a Melvin Manhook KO he had in funny off of a left hook. Actually, Melvin Manhook had a left hook KO in K1 back in the day where he clobbered the guy with a left hook, and as the dude's out, is Melvin Manhook throwing a left hook full power. So the dude is gone. And as he's like falling down, his legs get kicked out from underneath him from the low kick at the end of the combination. Um, but yeah, that fight is it's a thing of beauty, masterpiece level title fight. And what a great title fight because I myself I don't know how you felt at the time because I don't believe I was on the channel yet. I don't believe I was because I've been here about 3 years now, coming up on it. Or I've been here 3 calendar years, but 2 years. My 3 years next fall. So I was on the channel,
Yeah. Yeah,
I
I think you
believe.
were on the channel, but you hadn't started doing the preview shows yet.
No, I don't. Yeah, because I feel like because I the way that there's one easy way to find out, and it's to see if where the where the Aspinall fight was.
I have to say, I do love watching. I always like to go back and watch some like the old material that we've done on the main channel and on the on live as well. And I love going back and watching
Oh
your
yeah.
first ever post fight reaction because you were new to it. Obviously, I was trying to direct someone for the first time, so it was quite new for me. And it's that sort
Mm.
of early installment weirdness.
You know what? I started in 2022, so 3 calendar years, but 2 years. Yeah, that makes more sense. Yeah, it was
It's like
2022.
watching those early episodes.
So I
It's like
was a
watching
year
those
older
early
than him.
episodes of Baywatch when it was trying to be a serious drama about lifeguards.
I mean, yeah, and then I got the breast job and the breast enhancement, and suddenly my views started skyrocketing. And I knew me running in was gonna do it. Um, but yeah, I've shown women I've talked to when they go, "Doug, on YouTube, what do you do?" And I go, "Oh, I do MMA," because I usually tell them how nerdy I am, and then I go, "But I'm also quite bipolar." You know, I was like I said, I'm kind of a bipolar nerd, is what I always say, because I'm wearing a video game T-shirt from a very obscure game I love, and I'm like, it's like, yeah, I talk about MMA, and I trained, it's a I'm passionate about it, and I always show them my most recent one so they can see how jaded I've become at Apex cards, and then I show them my very first one, and I go, look how nervous I was, look at me using my phone because I my webcam wasn't working, like look at how I said, like, here's me when I had bad hair, here's me, like, um, it's like it's really fun to see my growth and like um not to toot my own horn, but like to see how far I've come in like confidence levels, because I knew I would be good at this, like I figured I would be, uh but I feel like I'm actually pretty good at this, way better than I thought I would be. And I'm just getting better and better, and that's because we have amazing fans like you guys watching, all four of you. No, I'm kidding.
So
No, I'm
normally I
kidding.
talk about the higher build fighter first, but in this case I'm going to talk about Michael Chandler first. So when it comes to Michael Chandler discussions, there's always a sort of the smell of Irish whiskey following him everywhere. So I want to ask you this question, Joe, because I've seen a lot of people
Super funny.
who are quite divided on this. This is going to be Michael Chandler's
Mhm.
first fight in 2 years, and part of the reason why he's been so inactive was because the plan always was for him to fight Conor McGregor for Conor's comeback fight. Conor's had his scandals outside the cage, he's had his injury issues. There's a lot of people that believe that there's contractual issues with the
Black.
UFC. A lot of stories, a lot of hearsay, which we won't go too into. If you were Michael Chandler, would you have done the same thing as him? Would you have waited for that big money payday?
I'm I'm going to double check one thing, because I think this is a very interesting point. Yeah, that's what I thought. Outside of outside of the Charles Oliveira fight, he has had a performance of the night bonus in every fight, including 2021's fight of the year for a lot of people, which I think it was mine too. Was him and Justin Gaethje? That fight's insane. Um, and I do have a very funny story about that one. But he's had a performance of the night bonus. I'm sure the UFC paid him. Uh, well, I don't want to say a truckload of cash. We know the UFC doesn't pay anyone truckloads of cash. Um, for God's sake, they let Francis Ngannou, the biggest star they had, leave. Um, but I'm sure they paid him very solid chunk of change. Uh, to come over finally for the dream fights and to have him in the promotion. But he definitely probably could afford to wait. I don't think it was like a financial issue. And then win or lose, you're probably set for life if you fight Connor in his comeback fight, you know? Um, like that's like kind of the problem, is because whenever there's a big money payday thing in boxing, everyone always assumes like there's some corruption at play. And I kind of hate that with Connor fights, because I know people that have questioned Cowboys' integrity in that fight, and I don't think that's very fair. Because I think in MMA, And in most fights, it's a very obvious to tell when something's fake. Like Mark Coleman guiding a fighter to, you have to take my knee. No, then you grab my ankle. Yes, now I'm going to tap.
And Coleman even
Okay.
does the full on
Like,
WWE, like reaching out his hand.
it's like, okay, okay. And we know we knew something was up when his opponent walked out to Real American. He wasn't going to do that job, brother. Um, but yeah, like there's a couple of like I know like a lot of people say a lot of pride fights were influenced, and I go which ones? Because I want to see which ones people think are influenced. The one where Pro Cop is kicking people's heads off, because I doubt it. I really doubt someone's gonna fake getting kicked that clean that hard. Um, there's no chance that Vochanchkin fight was fixed. Lord, who's taking brain damage on top of that? Like, we're gonna pay you to take brain damage. No, pay me to fake brain damage. Like, that's usually what I feel like it would go down. But yeah, I mean, um, I think he would have been set for life if he fought Connor. But I think after a year,
Yeah.
you have to know that guy is gonna duck you all day. I don't think he's fight. I personally am in the camp that Connor's just not fighting again. He's gonna tease it forever and never do it. There's a rumor that it's Dan Hooker next for Connor, which is super funny because he talked about it on Twitter. I think a couple days after this fight book, and I went, "That's
I
that's
don't think he
hilarious."
was
Um,
ever that interested in fighting Chandler because I remember there was a lot of. There
yeah.
were interviews where people were asking, I think it might have been the Mac Live, and he even asked him, who is your next
Hmm.
opponent going to be? Because I'm hearing different stories. And he almost said it almost resigned. It was sort of like, Chandler. So I don't think it was anything that he was ever too invested in. Like, getting back to Chandler himself, though, I can understand both sides of the argument. I think that it's
Yeah.
the sort of, in terms of your career, it's a good thing to stay active, to try and obviously climb the rankings, to get up to the top. And Chandler being such an action based fighter, you could see him getting more performance bonuses and maybe making just as much money as he would have done with Connor. But
Mm.
I would lean towards what he did, simply because I remember what happened with Holly. Holly had this sort of
Yeah.
guaranteed super payday locked up. She could have very easily sat out for the year, waited for Ronda to be ready, and then cashed in. But to her credit, she chose to stay active. And by the time Ronda was ready
Hmm.
to return, Holly lost 3 fights in a row.
Yep. And there was two new champions since then. Like, you know what I mean? So like things move fast in this sport is what I'm trying to say by that. Things move quick. So you know, like the sport moves very, very fast. When Michael Chandler left was to Dustin Poirier. At that time, it was Makhachev still champion in 2022?
UFC
No,
281 Makhachev had just become champion.
he just became champion. So yeah, that's right. Because 2023, January 2023 last year was Volkanovski and Makhachev. So and then yeah, which what a fight! Every time I bring that fight up in my head, I go, my God, fight is amazing. That's one of the best fights ever, I think. Um, spoiler alert: if that fight in however many years when it's eligible for a retro review, if that fight happens, it's a 10 out of 10. And that fight might even break the scale for me because that fight has all the makings of a Joe Neal type fight. Because like I think looking at my favorite fight of all time, you guys see what I kind of like. The questions, like like, oh, I'm gonna pose this problem for you. How do you stop it? Okay, by this. Now I'm gonna do this, and then okay, and then the constant escalation until there's nothing left. Um, I really like that in fights, and so yeah, that fight kind of hits that tickles
I'm
that itch
still
for
trying to
me.
think of a reason in my head that I can coax people into choosing 297 as a retro review.
Mm, that would be
Yeah,
a
it's
fun one. 297, you said?
297. The greatest night in the history of our sport.
I bet you want that one. Controversial fighters, I guess. Because Sean Strickland's in the main event. In fairness to me, uh, Mike Malott getting finished, getting upset was kind of wild, and to the point where I remember being excited for this guy because I remember saying that I thought of the three super prospects at welterweight, that they say are super prospects, Ian Gary, Mike Malott, and Shavkat. I ranked them as Shavkat one. There is no two or three. Then four is Malott. Then five is Ian Gary.
What about Jack Della?
And now I look stupid. Oh yeah, JDM obviously. JDM, and he's probably three or two right now. Him and Shavkat seem really close together. The wrestling needs to be addressed though. With because if he fought Shavkat's just gonna take
I
him
will
down.
say, Joe, I have realised that I would love to talk about Shavkat. I'd love to talk about the state of the
Oh yeah,
welterweight
yeah,
division,
yeah.
but we do need to get ourselves back on track here. So
Yeah, we can talk about other things in the next fight. Uh,
yeah, so we'll talk. So as mentioned before, so we're going to talk about Michael Chandler in a lot more detail here. What would you say are Chandler's X's and O's? What do you think he did really well in the first Charles fight, and what can he maybe tweak? Because a lot of people forget Michael Chandler dominated the first round of that fight.
yeah, almost a 10-8, if not like flat out 10-8. Um, his nickname is Iron Mike, Iron Michael Chandler. And like his namesake, Iron Mike Tyson, a lot of power, short, stocky frame, and very, very quick. He's known as like a wrestler. He came in, as like a wrestler, NCAA All American. I believe. I don't think he was a national champion, but very, very decorated wrestler, and has just dynamite in his fists.
He reminds me so much of
Uh,
Chad Mendez.
yeah, that's a fantastic comparison. He's kind of like Dwayne Ludwig era Chad Mendez, I'd say, Team Alpha Male. Um, and there's only one thing missing, but Chad Mendez didn't really have it either. I don't see a guillotine on this record. Oh, I see one. I see one. We have it. We have it. We got a guillotine. We got a guillotine. And if someone edits his Wikipedia to say TJ Dillashaw is a punk, then he is essentially a team alpha male fighter. Because he has a great right hand, just a monster of a right hand. Despite the Tony Ferguson kick, he isn't known for his kicks. Like he has a good body kick and low kick for sure, but he isn't known to go high necessarily with it. That one felt like because people forget Tony Ferguson won the first round. I think it was kind of like yeah, I can do this kind of a situation. It wasn't desperation. It was just like let me try something, and it happened to work.
One of the things I
Um,
have noticed which Chandler has started doing is a lot of his hype in terms of striking comes from his right hand. But I kind of think he
mhm,
started to acknowledge how prominent his right hand is and use it to set up his other
mhm.
weapons. Because I rewatched the Dan
Yeah,
Hooker fight, and if you notice, like about 90% of that
he's
fight, Dan Hooker is circling to his right. He's circling away from the power hand of
yeah,
Chandler. Chandler starts realizing
mhm,
this, and instead of thinking, I'm not going to overreach and throw my big right hand to try and catch this guy, he's expecting that.
mhm.
So what do? I come in with my left, drops him, and that sets up the finishing
Yeah.
sequence.
If I remember correctly, he throws a straight right to the body to get the hands to lower even. Because Dan Hooker's thinking right hand, right hand, right hand. Right hand goes low, and
Boom.
then here comes the left hook up top. And yeah, and it's because people say like, "Oh, he's got a great right hand." In like my level, which is I trained once, like could mean my left hand sucks. The highest levels of the game, very rarely does that mean their left hand sucks. Like it's like the Alex Bejeda left hook, right? Everyone assumes like, oh, we gotta watch out for his left hook. That doesn't mean his right hand sucks either. Like Like he's just really good at that technique, but he still splatter you with his right hand. His power isn't just one side. He's not, you know, he's not. I'm not making this joke. Moving on. Um, you can assume what joke I was going to make. A lot of personal time joke.
um,
Say. Um,
one thing people have said about Michael Chandler though is
mhm.
obviously we've seen a lot of what he can do on the offense. Are there concerns about his defense? Because we have seen
I think
even
so.
before the UFC, when you go back to look like the Will Brooks fight back in Bellator, and a lot of the times in the UFC,
Uh,
does he have a bad chin, or is it that he's
no,
not? He's in the wrong position when he does get hit.
I think it's that. I think his style kind of lends, because he's always threatening like level changes, even if he's like standing upright. He leaves himself open to get hit a lot. Like
Yeah.
he's hittable is the thing. And the guys like Will Brooks is like the only outlier there for getting stopped by him. Like that one's just weird. Well, because when you think of Will Brooks, I think of a lot of wrestling, lay and pray kind of stuff with some striking, but honestly, his UFC run probably why um, probably why I think about that. But like the Brent Primus thing was like a fluke injury. They say like a fluke because like his ankle just exploded, if I remember right. The good Pitbull brother that KO'd him, if I remember right, that's the good one.
With
Um,
with
then
Chandler, it's the shots he doesn't see coming.
yeah, because he throws himself out with every shot, essentially. At the end of every combination, he's thrown out of position. He kind of reminds me of Gibbler a little bit. Because Gibbler was like that too, but Gibbler didn't have problems with that so much later in his career when his durability kind of wore off. He had a very, very underrated chin. Gibbler did, but then his, just kind of wore off. Like I said, so his Gibbler had a problem with closing the door, as they say in striking, in like boxing and like in the striking in general, where he'll throw his right hand and then he'll reset after that. So he has to pull his right hand back, and it's a really awkward way of closing the door. Um, so like in this entire time as he's pulling back to reset his stance, he's hittable. Like he's just open, asking to get clobbered. That's how a guy like Diego Sanchez knocks down Gilbert Melendez. And if you watch that Charles fight, that first one, that's exactly how he got hit with that left hook. Is he throws the right hand and then just that's it. That's the end of it. And he's out of position, and here comes the left hook because Charles is closing the door. Charles goes right hand into left hook, with throwing your lead side last on the end of the combination. If I miss my left hook, I throw it, boom, I'm right here. I'm set, and I'm able to. And if I throw, if that makes sense. I'm hoping the visuals here can help out. I have much more room for activities, stepbrother style, to kind of to show off some of the more technical aspects. Um, so he has a big problem with that, and Gibbler had that problem. So that kind of reminds me of it. Tad Mendez himself, funny enough, again, that's such a great comparison. Tad Mendez had that problem because that got him caught in the second Aldo fight. Um, that's such a good one. That Chad Mendez one. That's getting better the more and more I think about it. Mostly because he has that guillotine win. Uh, uh, but yeah, I mean, this fight is a barn burner. I'm so excited for this fight. But there's only one question I have. 2 years, layoffs tough. But Michael Chandler's now 38.
That's the concern I have as well. And especially given that a lot of Chandler's fighting style is based around his explosivity. That's something that naturally goes when
Mm-hmm.
you get up there in age.
Yeah. I mean, because this is a guy that became champion. First time winning the belt was 13 years ago. You know, when he was 25. Imagine a 25-year-old Michael Chandler signing with the UFC in 2011. I don't know if he would have. ran through it like he ran through Bellator for a hot minute. But man, imagine him in like prime Cowboy, prime RDA mixing it up. That's one of the biggest what ifs to me. I wish he came earlier. Um, but
And from
it is what it
Charles
is.
Oliveira's perspective, when he comes into this fight, is it more of the same from
Mm-hmm.
him? Does he just follow the same sort of traits and the same tools that gave him success in the first fight? Because as we've sort of mentioned before, he was on the back foot before he got that knockdown.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think he maybe needs to change from that first meeting?
That's what makes this so interesting to me is you have like I have the belief that in a rematch, the loser has the advantage most often going into the second fight because for the loser you can go, okay, why did I lose? And you can kind of work from it from there and learn how to learn from those mistakes. The winner, he probably has mistakes he can learn from, which kind of makes this interesting because, the first round of their fight. So he has things he can learn from and make adjustments for. But for the most part, um, like in most rematch situations, the winner just kind of goes, I hope I can do it again. I can try and predict how he'll change up his attack on me. But for the most part, it's a little bit more difficult than that. Um, I think if I'm Charles, I think you're probably because I think it was a right hand that caught him. Charles has always had a problem getting hit as well. He's always been a
Mm.
little hittable. Um, but in recent years, his offense has been so good on the feet that it hasn't been the biggest problem. And he recovers very quickly. Like, I mean, Gaethje clobbered him, Dustin Poirier clobbered him, um, and it was fine. Sarukian clobbered him on the ground, and he was fine like a second later. I mean, that blonde hair looking like Ric Flair.
I
Um,
think one of the things that
so
helps with Charles's recovery is everybody knows how good his submission game is. Everyone knows how good his guard is. So if Charles does find any kind of pushback, oh, I'm hurt here, immediately he rolls onto his back. And because that
yeah.
guard is so potent, Gaethje wouldn't want to go down with him. Dustin Poirier wouldn't want to go to the ground with him. So it gives him the time to recover
Hmm.
because they're going to invite him back to his feet. So it's kind of
Hmm.
funny how that jiu-jitsu guard helps play into what's become a potent weapon. And the
The striking.
striking has
Yeah.
obviously substantially improved.
Oh yeah. Funny when you think about Islam Makhachev. Makhachev clobbered him and followed him to the ground. And that's the guy who got the finish, who beat him in the run, you know? Um, that's always kind of an interesting point to me in that situation. I hope you guys can't hear the dog. The neighbor's dog is in heat, and our dog is
Uh,
outside, and it's just been going berserk. And he's been whining most of this week. Last 2 days he's been cool though, but right now he is going berserk outside. I don't think you can hear it. I
as
think you would
long
have said
as long as
something
you
if you
don't
could,
do
because
the Terry
it's
Funk. God damn it, Cuda Brown.
if anything, I would have been like, Carl, I can't. My horse died. Or horse is sick. I can't. And then next for the what's it called? For uncaged, you'd be like, "How's your horse?" Like Vince McMahon did to him. Uh, but
And for Charles as well,
is Terry Funk the one that
for
got hit with
Charles
the?
as well, he's in a
Yeah.
very strange position when it comes to the title picture because
Hmm.
if you look at it on paper, Oliveira, he lost that fight against Sarukian, but it was a very close match. I've seen some people
Hmm.
suggest that Charles maybe did enough to win that one.
Yeah, me too. I've
This
noticed that.
technically could be a title eliminator.
Hmm. It's it's kind of wild to think that Chandler gets this title if he got this. If he beats Charles and he gets a title fight off of it. It's kind of a weird one to me because I mean, you think about it, kind of a weird one because he's in his last four, he's 1-3. But every one of those fights has been fantastic. So, and the 2 year layoff too. So if he KOs Charles, one, the layoff makes it that much more impressive. But if you look at his like record in the UFC, he's 2-3 in the UFC. It's kind of odd. He'll be 3-3 getting a title fight. Um, it just kind of goes to show you how important being exciting and a star is because um, I feel like a lot of casuals are being told like, "Hey, you got to watch this guy. This guy's awesome." And then he showed up, and all the casuals went, "He is," and it made him a star. Because I disagree with like a lot of the critique of from no offense to them, of course. To like, a lot of Connor fans were saying like, "Well, Connor doesn't need to fight Michael Chandler because he's a nobody." I disagree with that critique. Michael Chandler's a star. Him and Charles are stars. They're not superstars like a Pajeda or how Dana White views Sean O'Malley. They're not that, but they're stars. And they're stars from being quiet and just having great fights, and that's awesome. So, you want that as a fight fan.
Um, I think there might be I think when I did this fight first time around at 262, I think I picked Chandler to win.
Mm-hmm.
And I still stand by my beliefs that the prime Michael Chandler, or even the Michael Chandler of 3 or 4 years ago, would have a good chance of beating Charles. But in
Agreed.
2024, at 38 years old, with a 2 year layoff, I think you've got to play it safe and go for Charles to win this one.
I think that's a super good pick. I like your reasoning behind it too, because I don't remember who I picked to win the first fight, admittingly. I might have picked Chandler because power is such a great equalizer. I think Charles, in terms of like, if I were to put their abilities on paper, and Charles is a better fighter, and I thought he was 2, 3 years ago and all that. Um, but power is such a great equalizer that I think I might have leaned Chandler for the same reasons, but I have the same opinion here. I think Charles gets a finish. I think I wouldn't be surprised by a first round one, but I think it's a second round finish.
So now we move on to our main event of the evening, and the heavyweight title, not the undisputed heavyweight title, is on the line. As the champion, Jon Jones, he will be taking on the number 8 seed Stipe Miocic. The betting odds for this one, you can have Jon Jones as a minus 625 favourite. Stipe Miocic comes in at plus 455. So, Joe, this has been a fight which I think it's safe to say that it's not been a fight that a lot of the main MMA fan base have been emotionally invested in, and that's to put it lightly. A lot of different reasons behind that. The inactivity of both Jon and Stipe, Tom Aspinall's shadow hanging over this fight. Where do you personally stand on this?
Oh, I gotta be honest. I think I'm boycotting this card because of this. I think I'm gonna boycott it personally. As much as I hate missing out on some of these fights on the card, specifically the Ruthie and the opener and the co-main event. Um, I really dislike the narrative being pushed by the UFC with this fight. I really dislike the things Jon Jones is saying about this fight. I'm very much pro Tom Aspinall in the situation. I think it's ridiculous what they're doing to him, and it's just so blatant that I hate it even more. I think I'm not necessarily going to call for a boycott, but if anyone wants to join me, you know, maybe we can do something else instead next week. We can make it an INC community event.
Well, we are trying to get the
Um,
Discord going,
yeah,
so
yeah, I have time to do it. I actually have it right here. I have a docs ready to go for how to set up bots to help manage us and stuff. So maybe we can get that going by the time and make it a premiere because I it's for I really hate this narrative in modern sports because I've noticed it a lot lately when fighters call themselves the greatest ever. You know, LeBron James is a big culprit of this. He's always calling himself the greatest ever, and it's just not true. If you're a basketball fan, if you're a basketball historian like me, it's incredibly not true. He's not even the best from a talent perspective. Uh, and Jon Jones has been calling himself the greatest ever. It's all for my legacy. I'm going to fight Stipe, who retired officially as a firefighter to be and became a full time firefighter. I'm going to pull him out of retirement to fight the proposed best heavyweight in UFC history, maybe the best heavyweight ever. And if I beat him, I'm the best heavyweight ever because that works out my logic, and that makes me the best ever. What it's so dumb. Obviously he can't help what weight class he's at because for me, I don't think anyone above, I don't think anyone middleweight or above is in a goat category for me. I'm gonna take from the good weight classes, like at welterweight fringe, because GSP is so good. I it's only I only consider welterweight for GSP, and below are like the good weight classes, right? And so you can't really help your size, but I really hate this narrative of him
Mm.
calling himself the greatest ever. He's going so far to say, "I'm the goat." That's him texting right now, getting mad. And he's going his way to say, "I'm the goat." But with this Tom Aspinall shadow looming overhead, I think of him more as another animal. I think of him more as a duck here, uh, because he wants none of what Tom Aspinall has. And to me, the best heavyweights on the planet are still Tom Aspinall and Francis Ngannou. These guys are fighting for third.
And why do you think that the UFC have been so desperate to put this fight together? Like, is this the UFC trying to get back at Francis? And maybe, obviously, Francis beat Stipe. And if John could do it quicker than what Francis did, then it sort of emboldens Dana and says, hey, look, the sort of best heavyweight fighter in the world, he took 2 rounds to finish Stipe. John did it in one. Is this to try and feed John's ego? Because if it is, then I just don't understand the logic. Because let's be frank, Jon Jones has been a headache for the UFC pretty much his entire tenure with the company. And yet,
Yeah.
like, I understand he's a big draw. I understand he's a very talented fighter. But I think any other sport, there would be a tipping point. And in my opinion, Jon
Mhm.
Jones passed that. Like, the
Absolutely.
cycling industry
Mhm.
doesn't put Lance Armstrong on a pedestal because he won the most Tour de France's. He popped for steroids, he disgraced the sport, and they blacklisted him. The UFC, Jon Jones has done pretty much
Mhm.
the same thing. He gets put on the pedestal.
Yeah. It's ridiculous. I I think there's a lot of factors into this. One of them is Dana's personal hatred of George St. Pierre and Mighty Mouse, who for a lot of people are the consensus one and two greatest ever, right? And Dana dislikes both. I think it's super fair to say that Dana does not like both guys. Um, so I think that's definitely part of it for sure. Um, the other thing is, so I think he wants a guy to be like, oh no, this is the best ever, not those two goofs. Um, for sure, I think that's got to be a factor into it. I think another one is uh, like I think the Francis thing really got under his skin. Because remember, for the longest time, it was Francis doesn't want to fight, or no, Jon Jones doesn't want to fight. Jon Jones doesn't want, like wanting more money. Like we're paying him an arm and a leg to fight Francis, and he isn't wanting it. And then it's Francis wants more money because you know Francis knew he would have more opportunities if he left the UFC. And he's like, hey, can I get more money so I don't have to
And do you
leave?
remember what Dana White
Financial
said
reason.
about Jon Jones when Francis won the heavyweight title? If I was Jon, I'd be moving to
Yeah,
middleweight right now.
yeah, he did say that, and I remember that. And then 6 months later, it's well, Francis doesn't want to fight Jon Jones. It's like, oh my god, it's it's a lot. And Jon Jones is really enjoying. Jon Jones is a very egotistical headache of a man, so he is probably just loving. Like he was probably just like, well, Dana doesn't know what he's talking about. He'll come around.
Bless you. It is allergy season over there in Oklahoma. The joys of live broadcasting here. How are you doing, Joe? You okay now?
I'm all right now, I think. Maybe.
Maybe it's like a curse.
Oh, someone's talking
Maybe
about
it's
me.
like a
Huh?
curse. Maybe John knows that we're talking about him, saying some pretty bad things about him, and he's I'm gonna start bleeding from the hand anytime soon.
Papa Shango voice comes on. Um, and so so yeah, I think John is just like right now that Dana's, um, a very odd fascination with rooms and Jon Jones. I think uh I think it's just really playing into him, into his head, and I think now it's kind of I think Dana White has realized the monster he's created with this, because now he's like, back when these kids, like when they were coming up, someone gave them a chance. Uh, like even if they didn't think they deserved it, and that's what made him great. And he goes, I'm sure they'll give Tom Aspinall a chance. And Jon Jones cuts in and is just like, he has. What has he done? Like, what has he done? What has he done to deserve this? He fought Curtis Blades, the guy you didn't want to fight.
He's
What
beaten
else has he
5 of
done?
the
He's
current top
defended the
10.
title. Yeah, he beat what's his face? Not Karatanov. Oh
Pavlovich.
my God, I almost messed up.
When
Pavlovich.
nobody
Pavlovich.
wanted to
Very
fight
remind.
Pavlovich.
Yeah, Don Jones didn't want to fight Pavlovich, and he goes, he beat Pavlovich, that guy you didn't want to fight. Name something else. He defended the title that you haven't done yet. Anything else? I'm like he fought all these contenders. Anything? It's so dumb. Now he's like, I'm gonna fight Alex Pereira, who's done nothing a
And
heavyweight.
has no wrestling.
Yeah, it's just it's
And from
mind-boggling.
John's perspective as well,
Um,
it's very short-sighted. Like, look, don't get me wrong, Stipe Miocic is a very credentialed heavyweight. And obviously we'll talk about
oh
Stipe
yeah,
in a lot more detail later on. But what's to say that Tom Aspinall couldn't be that great heavyweight of, say, 5 or 6 years down the line?
future.
If John was to face Tom, if he wins, obviously it looks amazing on John's perspective if Tom goes on to achieve great things.
Yeah,
Uh,
that's someone he'll never
yeah,
get
like,
back.
I look at it in the same way
Yeah,
as, do you remember when Floyd fought Canelo? That fight
yeah.
maybe didn't mean as much when it happened, but when you look at what Canelo's done since then, that's that kind of.
I've been milking that for years. Yeah.
I mean, don't get me wrong, Floyd caught Canelo
Like,
before his prime, so there's that little asterisk next to it. But
yeah,
it's an example of a win which ended up aging really well, and John can have that. And if he loses, then you've lost to a guy who potentially could be a megastar. Because I do genuinely believe Tom Aspinall has the potential to be that.
I agree. I Paul Aspinall is probably going to be a megastar because one, he has a good sense of humor. He's funny. He looks like Frank Mir, so old heads go, I remember that guy, and it's like, no, that's another guy. Like that's not Frank Mir. And he looks so much like Frank Mir. It's so funny to me. Um, he looks like Frank Mir, and the lead singer of the band Incubus had a child. That's what Tom Aspinall looks like to me. All this and more on the channel. Me having theoretical love children to describe what someone looks like. Um,
So, I've got some
but
stats here in regards to Stipe. Like, well, obviously we're talking a lot about Jon
mhm,
Jones. He's the centre of attention. Stipe is very much sort of like the B side of this conversation, unfortunately.
sadly,
I've got some stats
yeah.
here in regards to Stipe. So, at 42 years old, his last win was against Daniel Cormier, the retired Daniel Cormier,
Mm-hmm.
at UFC
Mm-hmm.
252. So, we were still in lockdown when Stipe last fought.
2020.
2020.
Uh-huh.
And his last fight was a loss to Francis Ngannou at UFC
In the
260.
Apex.
That was the final pay-per-view that took place in the Apex, and it was the final fight of the Reebok fight deal. Stipe Miocic has not fought in the Venom era.
It's just insane to me because it's been like what? It's been 4 years or no, 3 years.
Uh,
So he was 39. He was
yeah,
39
so
at the
it's
time, right?
2021. So it's going to be 4 years in March.
It's outrageous. Like, and I think greatness doesn't leave. You know, I think if you're great at 25, I mean, I don't mean good, like really good. I mean like great, like Stipe was. I think you're probably still great in your 40s and 50s, right? Like even if you're not competing, it's like the whole old Rocky thing. I still have so left in the basement. Uh, and I think you know you probably still carry that greatness with you, like Rocky did in like Balboa. That was earned Rocky Balboa. That was like a lot of I kind of what I interpreted from that. Um, that said, this is so ridiculously stupid. This matchmaking. Oh my God.
I
Oh
think the
my
saddest thing
God.
from my perspective is that if this fight had happened, say, 2017, 2018, I think Stipe Miocic could be a stylistic nightmare for Jon Jones because,
Oh, he's
yeah,
beating
I
Jon
mean, he's
Jones.
got the size advantage. He's got grappling credentials of in his own right. I think I actually read somewhere that
Wrestling pedigree.
I think Stipe has taken down every opponent that he's beaten at some point. So he's got the wrestling chops and
Oh
great
yeah.
boxing, which has always been the big Jon Jones weakness. But at 42 years
Yeah.
old, and we saw what Stipe looked like when he was walking to his seat in MSG last year. Like the guy looked like he was like
Hmm.
hobbling, he was limping.
It's old. Wear and tear, man. Because firefighting's hard. Like that's the thing. Other people who are firefighters and they go, it's an incredibly rewarding job, and it's either pretty relaxed and easy, or it is the most physically demanding thing I've ever done. And and the guy who said that grew up a wrestler too. So it's like, dude, it outrageous to me. Uh, the uh, the level of what's it called? The level of wear and tear that's got to be on his body at this point. And Jon Jones has been calling him out specifically. It blows my mind. You know what's crazy to me is I did not think at the time, I did not think we were going to have more ridiculous matchmaking to cover after Khalil Roundtree fought Heda. And here we go. We've not just topped it, we've blown it out of the water.
I think that the matchmaking in the UFC this year has, for the big fights, has been very, very questionable.
I think it's been kind of atrocious, I'm being honest. Because I feel like we're doing this almost
Yeah,
every other card. Yeah, I think we're like, at least me,
because
because I'm a very,
I'm looking at
you know,
some of the more
extrovert.
questionable title shots that we've had this year. So you had like Chito Vera, Jamal Hill. There were some questions
Yeah,
about that. Bearing in mind he just come off an injury. Steve Ersic was a bit dodgy. Dustin Poirier had like a one fight winning
yeah,
streak. He was only really there because Makachev wanted to fight in June. You had Juliana Pena getting the
yeah.
fight of 2 years
Over
inactivity
Kayla.
and losing her last fight.
Yeah,
Khalil Roundtree, as you mentioned, Yuri getting a rematch instead of Ankalaev. There's been far too much of it this
yeah.
year.
It's outrageous. It's outrageous. Um, Rocky getting a title fight. I'm kidding. I like my job. I like my job. Uh, no. Yeah, no. It's been. I'm trying out the things again too.
The one thing I will say though, which I do think could be intriguing in regards to this fight, is that I think we're both in the same boat. We both think that this is going to be an easy Jon Jones win, and it will be my prediction. Spoiler alert. But I think there's elements of Jon Jones himself that does give me intrigue because the Steve Garn fight was so short that we still don't 100% know what Jon Jones is like as a heavyweight. He's coming off
Yeah.
he's coming off
Is it?
his first real big injury of his career because I think he did his shoulder in.
Yeah.
So there's that question mark.
Hmm.
And also as well, you look at a lot of the interviews that Jon Jones is undertaking. A lot of it is
Yeah.
looking past the Stipe fight. And how many times have we seen
Hmm.
fighters with one eye in retirement overlook their opponent and get humbled?
How many times have we seen Stipe do that to people?
Yeah. Like
You know,
Stipe made a career basically on being so unassuming.
the underdog.
Because I actually think one of the things that I always said that one of the big sort of knocks that Stipe had in terms of the whole greatness argument was that, yeah, when
War.
you had that idea in your head of the greatest heavyweight of all time, you expect a sort of
Yeah.
otherworldly figure, someone who has a bit of a mystique about them. Like Fedor had that,
Fedor and Kane.
Fedor and
Fedor and
Kane.
Kane.
Whereas Stipe was
Yeah.
just the normal firefighter who got stopped by Stefan Struve early in his career.
Hell yeah. You know, give me a couple Stipe
But that kind of works in
wowzers.
his favour. He's so unassuming that people don't realise you've got a really talented fighter there, or at least you did.
Mm. Like, even JDS had an aura. JDS was like, all smiles, happy-go-lucky sunshine, and then he gets into the cage and it's like, oh, I don't know, don't do this. Like, you know, Overeem, Pro Cop, Big Nog, I thought had an aura. Um, at least to me, it wasn't as crazy as like the other guys, but he had a little bit of it. And Stipe's just, yeah, I'm gonna bust open some Stipe Wisers, and I'm open a can of whoop ass on Jon Jones and Francis Ngannou. Give me a hell
People always
yeah,
compare him to Austin, but he sounds more like Boomhauer to me.
Boomhauer. Yeah, I think people have started making his nickname Stone Cold Stipe, which is awesome. It's so cool. I hate that it's now in his career. Like, Um, Stone Cold Stipe is perfect. If he walks out to like, stop walking out to MGK Stipe, walk out to like Last Shatter, and like, um, it'd be so awesome. Um, I I will say this is my off the record pick is Jon Jones winning, but you and me have picked same basically the same outcome every time. So I'm gonna do something weird. I'm gonna put money on Stipe winning by second round TKO. Will it happen? No.
At plus
But
455, it's worth taking a punt on.
I might put 50 bucks on it, see what happens. I mean, anyway. And boycott the fight. I'll bet on it. I'm not gonna watch it.
Uh,
Hold on. I can save the money I'm saving by not buying this card because I'm boycotting it. I can gamble. That's how money works, right?
this is all turning very James Krause right now.
It is. Hold on. I have ins with guys like King Mo and other fighters. Um, so I can definitely make this work. I'm the new James Krause. Uh, and I know what you're thinking. Am I only doing this for one benefit of the James Krause rumor?
Are you talk?
Laura Sanko? Yes. Yes, I am.
She's a happily married woman.
Well, I don't have a response
In
to
terms of
that.
how I think the fight's going to go, though, I picture something similar to the Gus fight, in that I could see John just staying at distance, peppering with kicks, Stipe being too slow to react to it, and then the sort of body shots and the leg kicks just building up, and then eventually crumbling around sort of the third round.
I could see it kind of being similar to the DC fight, just slower and more plotting. The second DC fight, I should say, until maybe a takedown, and because Stipe's probably going to stuff the first takedown or so, unless he's out of position. Um, but I don't think he'll stuff all of them. Jon is really bad at going like changing levels and going for it. I feel like nowadays, like in the Cyril Gahn fight. I picked Cyril Gahn to win because I was doing the previous shows at the time at that when I said, yeah, Cyril Gahn's going to win. It's like, as long as he doesn't do something stupid and just throw himself out of position and give up something, he should win. What's the first thing this idiot does is throw a no setup telegraphed straight left that leaves him out of position and just gets like Jon Jones, like Shido type of McDojo type of thing where Jon Jones just slowly goes down for a leg and takes it and gets a takedown and he gives up his neck. Um, I don't understand Cyril Gahn sometimes. It made me no longer a fan for how much he blew that one, I think. Uh, um, but I think Jon Jones probably takes him down eventually, and then that's where the finish comes is with like the elbows and the whatnot. And then he goes, Alex Bejeda, you've taken everything I work for. I'm also a really nice guy that I mentioned as Dana White's like has a pointing to like a room. Um, and I'm probably going to be really sad about it.
Do you think that's what Jon is going to do? Do you think he's going to call out Pereira, or do you think he's going to put the gloves down?
I think he's going to say, call me when you need, God, no, I think I just figured it out. I think he's going to say, I'm done unless Pajeda wants to step up. And then they're going to dance around that forever. And they're not going to strip Jon Jones of the main title. And they're going to keep Tom Aspinall interim champion for like 3 years.
What I would love to happen, it's never going to happen because we know that Dana is basically in Jon's back pocket right now.
Mm-hmm.
From the stories I've heard, I think Tom Aspinall will be cage side for UFC 309. Could you imagine a situation where Jon does his post-fight speech and then the company invite Tom into the cage and they basically put Jon on the spot there and say, "Oh, we've got Tom Aspinall here. Do you have anything to say to him?"
Mm-hmm. Well, he's got something to say to you. uh,
And the thing is, as well, one of the things I love about Tom Aspinall is just if you're from Northern England, there are a lot of Tom Aspinalls out there. It's just very much that sort of, "Hello there, Jon. I've got something to say to
you." Yeah. He does kind of. That's a very good Tom Aspinall impression. The hello, yeah. It's not He, it's Ha. You know, hello there, Jon. That's good. Yeah, that's good. And I think he's gonna. I would crack up laughing if they go. What if? Oh my God! Could you imagine? This would be so funny to me. They bring Tom Aspinall in, and Joe Rogan goes to turn to ask Jon Jones. Jon, do you have anything you want to say to Jon?
But he's scarpering.
Jon, where'd you go? And he's just gone. He straight up Forrest Griffin is out of there. Could you imagine that? Oh my God.
Running just as fast as he was running away from a crashed car.
That's what they're gonna say. They're gonna be like, "Oh my God, someone check the intersection." Jesus. There's so many funny Jon Jones stories that I love telling people that don't know about Jon Jones. And to tease Undisputed for the non-Patreon things, I'm gonna ask really quick, and I won't tell the story. I'll save it for Undisputed or not Undisputed, Uncaged. I don't know. I was thinking of the boxing game for some reason. Excuse me. But for Uncaged, I will ask you: have I ever told you? You're well aware, of course, of what Jorge Masvidal said about Ben Askren. If he sees Ben Askren at Whole Foods, he's going to slap him up, right?
Yeah.
Have I ever told you that I have two Ben Askrens of my own? That if I see them at Crest, which is my local grocery store, I'm slapping them up? Have I ever told you about that?
I am very curious to hear it. Really am.
Okay, well, I'll save it for Uncaged. I will literally make a note right now. Be like, tell Karl about your Ben Askrens, because I've been telling people that don't know anything about like MMA really, and I start off by going, Jorge Masvidal was a fighter. He's fighting Ben Askren, who's a megastar wrestler. Fucking Matt, it talks a lot of crap. Fastest KO ever, and then afterwards, months later, he's on Joe Rogan's podcast and says, I still don't like that dude. I still don't like him. If I see him at Whole Foods, I'm slapping him up. And I say, as this particular person and this particular person, they're my Ben Askren's. Pressed. I am running at them and slapping them up on the spot. Uh, but that's my little tease for Uncaged. If you want to see, of course, be sure to join the Patreon. A lot of great content on there, exclusive content like INC Uncaged, where you can hear me willingly talk about how I'm willing to incriminate myself for assault.
Did you mention the book club at all?
We had the book club.
Yes.
You recently finished the Ronda as a Hernando Laranja would say, the Honda Housey book.
Yeah.
The Ronda Rousey.
So yes, I have had the privilege of reading Ronda Rousey's second autobiography. I also have the first one as well, so I will be showcasing some of my opinions on that book. A very interesting read. I don't think it's necessarily going to change too many opinions on what you think of Ronda. I mean, if you like her, it's going to embolden your reasons why. If you dislike her, going to do exactly the same. But a very interesting read there. So that's going to be on the Patreon page, hopefully in the next few weeks. Another thing that will be happening on the Patreon page as well, a little bit earlier than normal, is you'll get the first chance to watch some of our early content, including December's Retro Review. So, Joe, do you want to tell us what that's going to be?
Yes, and I don't know if anyone's aware. I have a new setup. I actually have a monitor here and a monitor here now. So instead of me scrambling on my TV to find the thing, I can just have it ready and be prepared like a normal person would be. So I have it here, and here is an exclusive list of fighters that have come into the UFC and just been, here's a title shot. You know, we talked about Michael Chandler. He had one fight before he fought for the title, of course, but there was guys like, we had in UFC 14, Maurice Smith was a Pancrase veteran, fought Boss Rutten here actually, and came in and was given the tough task of fighting the seemingly unbeatable Mark Coleman. And then at 45, Frank Trigg comes in after a WFA title win to take on Matt Hughes, which was the first fight of their because they fought twice. Everybody always remembers the first fight, but this is the second fight, but this is their first fight. And that card also had Robbie Lawler, Tank Abbott fighting Cabbage Carrera,
which is like
super fun,
like the ultimate fat guy brawl.
Oh yeah, it's the ultimate Saturday night. Like I'm 14 Stipe Wisers deep, and and then UFC 157, which has the first ever women's title fight, and like this Dana ever was like, women are never going to fight in the UFC. Erica Montoya was talked about once, but that didn't happen. And then Ronda Rousey comes in, changes the game, as I've already covered with the Strikeforce Miesha Tate fight. But his is her taking on Liz Carmouche. And technically, UFC debuts for both people. So that's a 2-for-1 special. And then finally, UFC on Fox, Henderson versus Melendez. This is like when Strikeforce was fully getting integrated kind of in with the UFC. You had a lot of debuts on this card, like Josh Thompson, Daniel Cormier, Yoel Romero's on this card, which is wild. I think he fights Clifford Starks. I don't remember.
Good
but
memory.
I believe that was
good memory.
Yeah. So I remember watching that, the early prelims on my phone, and it's with a jumping knee. It's awesome. But then the main event, of course, Vincent Henderson versus Giblert Melendez. That's how he'll always be remembered. Giblert Melendez, and they're fighting in San Jose too, which is Strikeforce's home place essentially too. So it's almost like a UFC Strikeforce co-promotion card in a weird way for me, because of how many Strikeforce names are on it. But honestly, that card is fantastic too. And it went to a vote, and winning with 58% of the vote. I did not expect this one to win at all, and not win like this. But UFC on Fox, Henderson versus Melendez wins. So this will be the second fight night I've covered on a retro review series. And I legitimately thought 157 was going to win, because it was a Ronda card, Ronda big star. I thought, Gilbert Melendez, Gibbler, excuse me, and Benson Henderson. Their names, and people forget Benson Henderson, and people like Gibbler and have fond memories of Gibbler. But I don't think that's what's going to win, right? I guess you never trust, never deny uh, or never doubt the draw power of a Diaz, even on a main, or even on the undercard, not even on the co-main. So goes to show what I know.
And a
But
landslide poll
80%
result,
of the vote.
a landslide poll result nobody saw coming. We've seen a lot of those recently.
Oh yeah, seen a lot of them.
Yeah.
Um,
So
I mean, like
that's what's going to be
so far
happening
though,
in
the
December.
January ones,
Yeah.
I'm shocked at what's winning in January personally too.
Good thing you brought that up there, Joe. So that's what you can expect in December. In January, the poll is already up here, and the rumor is that we're going to be going back to Los Angeles. So there have been 5 cards which have taken place in LA over the UFC's history. We've already covered one of them already in the Retro Review. The other 4 are up for nomination. What are they, Joe? Very quick.
The nominations for January are UFC 60, where you get to see Matt Hughes take on Royce Gracie in like a new school, old school kind of colliding, and that fight also that card also is just pretty good if I remember right. UFC 104, which was Machida Shogun, which infamously had one of the funniest things of all time. One of the funniest quotes came out of that fight. Cecil Peoples, the dumb bozo himself, as one of her comments said low kicks don't actually win fights. Okay, sure. And then Shogun versus Brandon Vera, which was another Fox card, another fight night, but it had Machida and Ryan Bader as well as the co-main event, which is really fun. And then UFC 184, Kat Zingano, Ronda Rousey. Uh, Everyone knows how that finish happened. But it also had Rocky taking on Holly Holm, Tony Ferguson, Gleason Tebow. So that fight I thought had a good chance of winning, but UFC 104 currently is winning at 56% of the vote, and UFC 60 is what I voted for. My vote counts the same as your guys'. Um, and I thought 60 was going to win, and now you guys are so far surprising me with 104 winning.
I voted for 184 just because I love the thumbnail.
That's fair. Yeah, you want I I have a funny story about 184. I was I
We'll save it, Joe. We'll
yeah,
save it for
Uncaged.
Uncaged. So we are going to be
Yeah,
recording that sometime tomorrow. For now, though, this is time for the UFC 309 preview show. It has been an absolute pleasure once again to be joining you. I would love to keep this going, but we are pressed for time. I've got other things going. I'm down to mood lighting here. It's proper dark up here in the northeast of England. So, my name is
we
Karl
just passed
Bainbridge.
noon.
That's been Joe Neal. And we will be back in a few weeks' time as we preview UFC 310. And Joe, it's a December preview show. You need to break out the Christmas jumper.
Excellent. Time to be full on Santa Clausing it. Let's go. I'm working. I already have the gut worked on.
Bye bye for now, everyone.